everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your Sun in Gemini and Pisces rising. Both of these signs are mutable signs, which means that the people who have planets, but I would say specifically personal planets, or when we include the rising sign, that's a personal point. When you have personal points in mutable signs, so we're talking about Gemini, the opposite sign Sagittarius, Virgo, and Pisces, you're going to tend to be flexible. And that means that you can adapt to different situations. So this is like double mutables. Obviously, you're going to have to look at your moon sign, your Venus, your Mars, your Mercury, to see what they're in, because the preponderance of one particular modality than another might tip it in one direction versus another. So, but we're going to talk about it from that standpoint of flexibility, because the sun and the rising signs are very important in terms of how people perceive you and how you behave in group situations and what your aspirations are. The sun is connected with your aspirations. So it's all about what it is that you want to accomplish in life and how you want to shine your light. So with the sun, we're talking about, in Gemini, I should say, we're talking about someone who is ruled by Mercury and rules the third house in astrology, which deals with the mind, which deals with communication, teaching, learning, the media, social media, so the internet. And this can make a person who is very intellectually curious. And with that kind of, nature, you're going to be someone who loves to talk, who loves to exchange ideas with other people. And there's a fluidity. Part of that is because you are a mutable sign, but also because Gemini, being ruled by Mercury, is mercurial. That means that Gemini people can change on a dime. And this can be a little bit disconcerting for signs like Taurus, which are very set in their ways. And they expect somebody to be consistent from day to day. This combination ain't gonna go that route, because we're talking about double mutable. I'll get back to the sun, but I wanted to talk about Pisces as the ascendant. So this means that you are ruled by Neptune, because that's the sign, that's the planet that rules Pisces. And you can also say that your sun's ruler, Mercury, is your ruler. These are quite different in how they express themselves, because we're talking about the intellect versus the spirit. Now, with Pisces rising, because the rising sign is the cusp of the first house, and that deals with, the first house deals with the body, that's going to show you how the person is physically, how they may look. So with any water sign, and the other water signs are Cancer and Scorpio, there could be somebody who retains water. So sometimes they might look puffy. You might look puffy. Sometimes you might look a lot thinner. So for women getting periods and well, I'm trying to think, where am I going with this? Because no, I think when women get their periods, they retain water. I think that's where I was going. There's bloating. Sometimes it happens to the best of us. Well, not me any longer, but My eggs are dried up, but anyway, that's another story for another day. Um, so what can happen here is that you look different from day to day. This can be kind of a freaky thing where people see you, it might just be your weight, that you look, very skinny, because Gemini, I think people who are Geminis tend to be skinny because they're just always in motion. They might forget to eat, they might be ungrounded because Gemini is an air sign, so they're not, air is kind of floating around. It's not grounded. And but the water signs in general can tend to sometimes look, have more of a fuller figure, specifically because of water retention. But yeah, I mean, there could be other factors as well. But it could be kind of like a strange thing where somebody sees you one day and you look one way and then another way. Because another thing too is in terms of how you photograph. And this is just specifically with Neptune because Neptune rules photography, and you may have you may be photogenic, where you actually look better in pictures than you do in real life, but it can also work the other way. I have an opposition between, what was that? Neptune and my ascendant. And I always had this thing that I did not feel that I looked the same in pictures that I did in real life. Sometimes it was really good and sometimes it really wasn't, but it wasn't the same. And so, but in this case, it might be that it's enhanced because it's almost like a magical thing. I mean, yes, it's about photography, but it's also about this kind of indefinable aura. There's always this kind of thing with Neptune, Pisces rising, or if you have Neptune in the first house, especially if it forms a conjunction with the ascendant, where the person may give off a kind of glamour that, we associate with movie stars or other people who are celebrities. And when you see, that's one of the things that I always liked looking at old movie books and looking at the old stars and their photographs, because they would always have these very, like even in black and white photographs, there was this kind of artistry that you can't really, it doesn't really translate to color photographs. And there was this, I don't know what you would call it, fairy dust, this larger than life charisma, but it's very subtle actually when you're talking about when it's transferred to film in some way, or even through the eyes. I have a video about Neptune in the first house on my channel that might give more information about exactly how this plays out. But yeah, it can seem very intriguing. There might even be this kind of mysterious quality, magnetic, probably more magnetic than anything else, that you give off to other people that draws them in. And I think another very interesting quality about people that are that have Pisces rising is that they tend to have this very youthful appearance that is really like, it's almost like they retain the helpless qualities that they had as a child. So the little boy or the little girl kind of a quality. And that can kind of like show itself as innocence or, like I said, helplessness, and other people can rush in to try to rescue you. And this is because Pisces is known as the victim. Now, it's important to note that some of these words that we use, we're not saying that this is going to be true across the board, but there are archetypes. These different signs, these different planets, these are archetypes, meaning that they have a template, they have certain traits, but that doesn't mean that everyone is going to resemble that 100%. So it's so important to be aware of how much this can kind of stay with you even long after you have left childhood. Because I have said over and over again that I do personally believe, based on what I've read and what I sense and have experienced myself, is that after the first Saturn return, a person starts to let go of the rising sign influence more and more. Doesn't mean it fully leaves the person. I was just thinking about that myself because I have the sun in Sagittarius and I have Taurus rising, and I really believe that that Taurus influence will always be with me in one way or another, but it just doesn't dominate the way I think that the rising sign can do so, even into one's 20s. And this is because of that first house connection, in my opinion, because that's the beginning of it all, this lifetime, this cosmic blueprint that the natal chart is all about. It requires that rising sign to start things off, to kick things off. And so I personally believe, especially if there is a hard angle from the sun to the rising sign, that the family of origin, that there might have been some problem in really fitting into that scenario, and that the rising sign becomes a coping mechanism where the child uses certain behaviors, or maybe, adopts a persona to try to fit into that system and also to cope with what is going on. And in this case, we have the sun in air and we have Pisces rising. So it's possible that there was for you something traumatic in your family of origin. And the reason I say this, I mean, this can happen to any combination of signs. I'm speaking specifically about having a prominent Pisces in one of the inner points, especially sun, moon, or rising sign. I feel that any sign can experience trauma, but when it is Pisces, maybe Cancer, maybe all of the water signs in particular, because they are emotional, that it can hit them harder because they're coming from a place where they're very connected to others emotionally. Your sun sign, Gemini, being an air sign, is very, very different in how it navigates life. And because the sun is the primary influence, this is going to be more and more your default way of navigating life as you get older. And I think that there's a really good side to that because, like I said, mutable signs can be adaptable. I feel like if you have Pisces in a prominent position, you may have grown up with some sort of chaos You may have grown up in an environment with addiction, with those Neptunian qualities, mental illness, maybe just a lack of order in the home, and a lack of organization. Neptune can be very dissolving, meaning that there's not structure. Maybe you were not given proper structure. So you might have been able to do what you wanted, but you didn't have that guiding hand to help you in some cases. And so while that can be something that when a person is older, like a teenager, having more freedom might not be such a bad thing. When you're younger, that can feel very disorienting, and even the person can feel like they're being neglected. And, if God forbid you did experience abuse of some sort, that can also be very disempowering. The thing that I associate with Pisces is learned helplessness. But, the reason for when we say the word helpless, children are helpless. There's no question. They're not autonomous. They can't just go out and say, okay, screw this. I'm going to go out, get a job, and I'm going to leave this environment. They're kind of forced to be in an environment that can be very perilous at times. So however you grew up, you may have learned how to kind of like escape into fantasy. And this is a common trait. Sometimes it can come across as daydreaming to teachers in the school. And, think about that. Think about the number of children who get in trouble for daydreaming. Maybe it's gotten better now, but I know that, sometimes teachers would yell at students for not paying attention. And it's really a way for the mind to help to kind of detach the child from the pain that they're in. So it serves a purpose. It really does serve a purpose. And so escapism can be something that you have always kind of engaged in. And perhaps as you get older, you're more able to kind of desensitize and be able to not feel that urge to do that all the time. Because what I'm talking about is tuning out. And that kind of thing can lead to like not paying attention to what's happening around you, because that was kind of a defense mechanism. But the other thing too is you might have been the scapegoat in your family of origin, where you were blamed for everything and you were bullied or singled out. And that kind of treatment can lead to that victim mentality. And the person feels like there's always someone that has it in for them, and that they're oppressed by others. And there could be some truth, because if you experience that in childhood, it's not a lie, but it's all about learning how to see it as some kind of lesson rather than some kind of curse. And then maybe there can be some kind of constructive thing that comes out of it. Because it can be way too easy for someone to feel as if they're just doomed in life to being always getting the short end of the stick. And then that becomes the person's identity. So that's one thing that I want to say. The other thing is that being ruled by Neptune, it's really important to embrace truth. And this goes back to that idea of fantasy. I use the term escapism, but you could say like fantasy that Neptune is associated with. Neptune has been linked to deception, which can mean lying. And certainly Gemini has also been accused of speech, maybe false speech sometimes, perhaps when the sun, or if the person has Mercury afflicted, that could be the case. But with this rising sign and other prominent Pisces placements, there may be reasons why a person has trouble telling the truth and sometimes even perceiving the truth. If the person grew up in an addicted household, the Pisces rising person, they may have heard lies from their family of origin, from their parents, for instance. And those lies may have flown in the face of what you could perceive with your own eyes. If you asked your father, why is mommy, lying in on the living room floor at high noon, and that bottle of alcohol is like right beside her on its side, and the father says, oh, she's just tired, that's going to mess with your perceptions of what your reality is, and it can cause you to second guess yourself and to say, maybe I didn't see what I saw. And these are the kinds of things that dysfunctional families do to the children. They say, you didn't see this, you didn't hear that. It's like, that's your imagination. They gaslight them because they don't want them to know what they've done. And with the most dangerous in terms of, physical harm, if someone comes from a family where getting assaulted by an adult is something that is a real danger, the child may lie to avoid getting caught. And that those lies start to be easier and easier to do, because it becomes a habit. But it's done as a protective measure, and then as an adult, maybe it becomes such a habit that the person always lies because they don't want conflict in their life. And that has its own set of consequences. But, and also people do lie sometimes because they feel insecure. So they may, or, like they're carrying a lot of shame. There's a saying, I think it's in AA, but in that kind of model, maybe of the adult children of alcoholics, they lie when the truth would serve them better. So with Gemini being the sun sign, it may, especially as you get older, it may distress you to be emotional. And of course, look at the moon sign, because that is supposed to be the emotional nature, specialize in the emotions. If it's in water or even fire, because fire can be emotional in an impersonal way, then there's a greater likelihood that you are going to be more influenced by emotion than not. For people who are, maybe you have the moon in earth or air, so that will make you more detached. And you might really try to, as you get older, disown that emotional part of yourself, because it reminds you of when you felt helpless. And if you do that, you will not be really dealing with the entirety of who you are, because you do have an emotional side to you. And to pretend otherwise is really not to be in touch with all parts of you. So it could almost become like a shadow self, that emotional part. And also this can tend to, make you want to make emotions abstract, because that's what air signs tend to do anyway. But you may have an even greater need to kind of like intellectualize your emotions. And when you do that, it becomes easier to be dismissive of your emotions instead of really embracing and having compassion for yourself when you're vulnerable, when you doubt yourself, when you don't feel like you know what to do in a particular situation, by being able to embrace that and not feeling shame that you are somehow weak because you're actually expressing vulnerability, that can really become your superpower. So, in terms of what your personality may be like, you may be a very imaginative person, and you also can be very clever. So this can bode well for any kind of profession that involves coming up with great ideas and, and being creative. So like advertising, I think of Gemini people as being natural for advertising. And it was funny. I was just listening to YouTube autoplay, and they just played a Barry Manilow song, and I was really getting into it. And Barry Manilow used to be in jingles, and as a matter of fact, I think he might be a Gemini. Maybe he's on the cusp with. I think he was like a late degree Gemini. I'm not sure, but anyway, he would make jingles. And people who write catchy songs or compose that kind of music that's very catchy, they're natural. They are natural for jingles because a jingle is a piece of melody that is very short and sweet and if it's done right, it's very memorable. Everybody can sing a jingle from their childhood of some kind of commercial that they would always see. So this can be that kind of talent that you have, because I would say music would be Neptune or Pisces, and Gemini comes up with the, kind of like these slogans and things like that. So it's a perfect marriage for that type of profession. If you are in education, because of that connection with Mercury and the air and the sun sign, then you could be someone who, like if you worked with small children, that you could read a lot of storybooks to them, and you could stoke their imagination while at the same time helping them to learn. Actually, this combination is very versatile for many different types of professions because of the double mutability factor. In terms of love, you might be quite a slippery fish because you're double mutable, and not so much Pisces. Pisces can, and this may be true, that you might commit at a young age to someone simply because you are looking for love and you're looking to be taken care of. But Gemini loves freedom. So it could be one of those things where you marry young and then you maybe you do raise a family, whatever, but then in those cases, there might be some of you who decide to, go your own way, have more autonomy. And the other piece in this is the fact that Pisces is very impressionable because it's mutable water. And because it's on your ascendant, it really does impact the way that you interact when you're in a social setting. So water can take on the energy of others that are around. And, there was that famous study, that doctor who programmed water and things like that. So it's very important for this combination to be very selective about the company that you keep, the environment, even the physical environment that you're in, because you can really absorb the energy of that. You're a natural empath by virtue of having Pisces rising. So this can make you, I would even say, if you remember that song, love the one you're with. And so for some people, that could lead to them being influenced by their environment. And if they just so happen to be in a different environment than the person that they are committed to, if you want to call it that, then they might be influenced by the new situation. And it's like a fluidity in the person's ability to kind of adapt to a new situation. So that can lead to maybe having trouble with commitment at times if other factors support that. I think it would be less likely if the moon is in a steadfast sign like Taurus or Leo or Scorpio. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there. I hope that resonated. And if you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.